This computer's been acting wonky,
Right.
as you saw.
Okay.
So at any given time, it may decide that it wants to stop. And if that happens, we'll stop and start over. And I can
Okay.
always make an audio
Okay.
edit, and it's no big deal. But I hate to interrupt you in the middle of a thought because people get rolling with their story, and the hardest thing to do is say, "Just like you got to stop," as you saw. So, Bob, what is your full name?
Robert Gross.
Gross?
Yes.
Okay, and do you go by Bob or Robert?
Bob.
Bob, okay. And you're from where? Where in Maine?
I'm from Gardner, Maine.
Gardner, Maine. Gardner.
Gardner, that's right.
Gardner, Maine. Okay. So we'll just kind of get rolling with
Okay.
your sarcoidosis story. The only thing I would say is don't tap the table
Right.
because it makes
I'm
the
sitting
microphone.
back, yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
good. Because people, when they want to make emphasis, they tap. I do the same thing. So let's get started. Welcome back to the Sarc Fighter podcast. I am joined today by Bob Gross of Gardner, Maine, and he's here to share some of his sarcoidosis story on the Sarc Fighter podcast. Bob, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about where sarcoidosis is impacting your body.
Okay. I've had pulmonary sarcoidosis, which is the lungs. I've been misdiagnosed twice with cardiac, but aside from all the trouble of going through the misdiagnosis process, it's just my lungs.
Well, I guess that's good news.
Yes.
So how bad is it in your lungs?
I have 61% lung capacity between both lungs. I used to have 52%, but I've lost weight, and they measure your lung capacity based on your weight. So the same lungs are now worth 62%.
Okay. So now, are you retired now?
Yes, I've been
All right.
retired since 2005.
All right. Did you retire because you reached that age, or did you retire because you had health issues with sarcoidosis?
I had health issues with diabetes.
Okay.
And they got tired of calling the ambulance at 4:30 in the afternoon.
Wow.
So, but that's a different
That's a different
disability.
story.
It's a different issue.
Sure. So you're going along with your life. I don't want to say fat and happy, but I mean because you have the diabetes and so forth. But all of a sudden, sarcoidosis appears. How did that happen?
The first time I noticed any particular lung problems, I was on a cruise with my fiance and her family. And on a cruise ship, they have long aisles. And I forgot something in my room and had to backtrack and go back. And I could hardly breathe.
Wow.
That was the first time. I saw the ship's doctor, and he gave me an albuterol inhaler for asthma. But as it turned out, the inhaler never helped me, and I didn't have asthma. But I didn't find that out for 2 years. My primary care doc labeled me with exertional asthma. And every time I'd see him, when I say coughing, it was a chronic cough. I would cough so much and that I would get rib cage pain because my ribs were just tired of coughing so much.
Dry cough, coughing up phlegm.
Dry cough.
Uh-huh.
Dry
Okay.
cough. I spent 2 years where codeine cough syrup, just to relax the cough, was the only thing that helped me. Like I said, the albuterol inhaler never helped, but the doc kept saying some asthmatics wheeze and others cough. And that was the end of
And
this discussion.
he was sure he was right.
Yes.
And how did you figure out he was wrong?
Well, I thought I was having a heart attack one day. I could hardly breathe. And I asked my wife to call the ambulance. And I went to the emergency room. They thought I was having a heart attack too. But they take enzyme tests to verify a heart attack. And my heart enzymes, cardiac enzymes, were fine. They took a chest x-ray, came out and asked me if I smoked. And I said, no, I've never smoked. And they said, well, as you probably didn't, because with all that black on your chest x-ray, you'd be dead by now. So they ruled out lung cancer. There was a resident from Portland. I live in Gardner, which is about an hour from Portland. There was a resident who was moonlighting in the Augusta Hospital that weekend. And he looked at the chest x-ray and said, he has a widened mediastinum. Your rib cage kind of spreads apart a little bit.
Okay.
And the doctors at the hospital, the regular doctor said, well, he's fat, and fat people have widened mediastinums. So they ruled that out. Well, they put me in the hospital overnight. A few hours later, that pulmonology resident from Portland came up and made arrangements for me to have a bronchoscopy, where they take a biopsy out of your lungs.
Sure.
Because I don't know if he convinced them or they just couldn't figure out what else I had.
So let's take a closer look.
So they let the guy from out of town come up, and they arranged that. The bronchoscopy just took 4 small samples, 4 small biopsies, and came back negative. They immediately scheduled me for a mediastinoscopy, which takes a larger sample of your lung tissue. Because they said, with all that black on your chest x-ray, we can't imagine the first test came back negative.
Right, something's going on.
Right, yeah.
So at least they kept looking.
Right, and the mediastinoscopy takes a larger swatch of tissue, and that diagnosed me as having respiratory sarcoidosis. And this was in 1995. The doctor then referred me to a practice in New York City. That was the closest place where there was doctors who knew anything about sarcoidosis.
Was that Mount Sinai, or where was that?
It was just a practice of 7 doctors.
Okay.
It was just, and in an office, and not part of a clinic or anything. So I called and I made the appointment, and the receptionist said, for your first appointment, be prepared to pay between $1,500 and $4,500 cash, or cash check or money order. And I said, excuse me, I have good insurance. And she said, we don't take insurance. But they'd be happy to give me all the paperwork I needed to fight with my insurance company to get some reimbursement for it.
At that point, sarcoidosis means nothing to most insurance companies.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. And so I thought about it for a couple of days, because I didn't have $4,500, and that was just for the first visit.
Yeah. Who does? I mean,
plus the airfare from Maine to New York City. So I went to the now the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research was only established in 1994, and this was 1995. But they were the only, when you put sarcoidosis into a search engine, that's the only thing that popped up.
Right.
So I called them up and I explained the situation. I said, I'm just looking for a doctor who knows about sarcoidosis, who takes insurance. And I don't care if it's a good doctor or a bad doctor.
Some doctor.
Just some doctor who can help me with this. And they said, well, and although the foundation publishes on their website names of doctors in different states, at that time it was a brand new organization. They didn't have anything.
Sure.
And they said, oh, we don't recommend doctors by name. I thought about that for a couple of days. I didn't know what to do. And I went back to the foundation website. I went to the board of directors page. I wrote a letter to every person on the board of directors with an MD after their name.
Really?
And I said the practice in New York City had 7 sarcoidosis doctors. 4 of them were on the board of directors because there was a small community of both patients and doctors who knew anything about it. So I wrote all of the doctors a letter, explained my situation. I even sent it to those 4, thinking they'd show sympathy at me.
Right.
A physician from the University of Chicago Hospital wrote back and said that he had 2 doctors who specialized in sarcoidosis, and so I went there. The airfare from Maine to New York and Maine to Chicago was the same, $300. So it was like, okay, I will go there, and they were, they helped me. They put me on prednisone.
No kidding.
And yes, and I was on prednisone for a total of 5 years.
How many milligrams a day?
40, and then eventually down to 30.
Okay.
And
did you gain some weight?
Oh yeah.
And you were already large at the time.
I was a big guy before, and I was 420 pounds 5 years later.
Wow. So you've lost a lot of weight because you're not like Ichabod Crane right now, but you're not a big guy.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So go ahead. Just for the listeners' sake.
Yeah. Right. No, it really swelled me up, but I could breathe good, and before I could hardly breathe.
Right.
So it was, I used to call myself the prednisone poster child until I started getting all the side effects of long-term prednisone use. But when I was breathing clearly, I called myself the prednisone poster child.
Right.
It took 5 or 6 tries to taper me off of the prednisone because I started having trouble breathing again. So they would take me off a longer and longer time until I could get off prednisone without having trouble breathing. From there, I thought I was fine, and over the next 20 years, I've developed 3 problems of long-term side effects of prednisone. I have early cataracts. I have 2 cataract lenses. I developed leg ulcers because prednisone, the adhesive between your 6 layers of skin, loosens up.
Really?
So
that's a new one. I hadn't heard that one. Yeah.
You just bump your shin on a chair leg, and suddenly you got a leg ulcer. And it was like instant leg ulcer, and I also have I have a chronic vitamin D deficiency.
Right.
Which it wasn't until I got involved with Sarcoidosis Foundation that I realized that was a normal sarcoidosis side effect, having nothing to do with prednisone.
Right.
And
so you've taken the prednisone for a long time.
Yeah.
They decide you've been on it for too long, having all these side effects.
Right.
And the prednisone itself is making your life miserable, and you gained a bunch of weight.
Yeah.
So what did you do to get from there to where you are now?
I just kept living one day at a time.
You stopped the prednisone? Did you take any medication?
No. The only time I take prednisone now is if I catch a cold or something and my lungs fill up.
Right.
I'll take it for 2 or 4 days.
Right.
And anybody with asthma. My wife has asthma. Anybody with asthma, when their lungs fill up, will take prednisone for a few days just to knock it down.
Just to knock it down,
sure. Nothing like I used to.
But you've got to control the sarc with something right now.
Well, no,
nothing.
I have reduced lung capacity.
But it isn't spreading to other parts of your body then?
No. I've been misdiagnosed twice with cardiac sarcoidosis because I'm a big guy. I do have some heart problems.
Right.
And the doctors think, Well, he had respiratory sarcoidosis. Well, this must be caused by cardiac sarcoidosis.
Right.
So they put you back on prednisone.
Gotcha.
And the last time I had a misdiagnosis, I was on 60 milligrams of prednisone until I got back to the University of Chicago. Which I really love those guys.
Yeah. Okay.
Until I got back there, and they took X-rays and MRI and everything, decided I didn't have it. But once I was on it, it took 7 weeks for me to taper off, and I gained 40 pounds.
Right.
And you're seeing those 40 pounds on me now.
Right. Right. Well, I gained, I don't know, probably 35 pounds. I'm a kind of a short, skinny guy normally, so that's a lot on my little frame. So you've joined the Board of Advocates.
Yes.
What does your mission? What are you trying to accomplish?
Okay.
How do you want to help?
Okay. In Maine, which is a rural state, that's why they had to send me to New York. That's
one of the most rural
states. That's how
the
whole odyssey started.
People think of the Northeast, but once you get above southern Maine, there's nothing.
Right.
Right. Okay. So you've got a rural state.
Yeah. And we try to do proclamations. April is Sarcoidosis Awareness Month, and we try to have the governor do a proclamation just to advertise that there were resources for sarcoidosis, and hoping people would call, because there's really even at the present time there are 9 doctors in Maine who are on the sarcoidosis registry with the foundation, but I don't know anybody who sees them, so I don't know how effective they are or how many sarcoidosis patients they actually see.
Right. Right.
And so I'm just trying to find out.
Right.
And again, in a rural state, just trying to publicize, because I want to find out what doctors the other patients are seeing. Maybe we could refer some of them there. My case, I went to Chicago, so I don't really know any of the local resources.
Right. So you were seeing a pulmonologist in Chicago?
A pulmonologist at first, and then with the 2 cardiac misdiagnoses,
right?
I see a cardiologist now,
right? Okay.
Who is also familiar with
sarcoidosis.
Yes, yeah.
That's the good thing is when you started with this journey, there were no doctors in Maine. Now there are 7. Yeah. I have doctors in Roanoke, Virginia, not a huge city. The Roanoke Valley inclusive is about 300,000 people, and we've got the Carilion Clinic there, which is a growing and robust, thank God, medical facility. But my point is that there's more and more doctors now who are familiar with it, who speak it, who understand it to the extent that anybody can understand it. I think the frustration is everybody's playing from the same playbook. You go with prednisone and methotrexate and maybe Remicade and azathioprine, and now I'm on Humira. But I'm surprised you're not on some kind of a maintenance drug.
Well, no, my lungs are clear. It's just there's not as much of them anymore.
It's just that sarcoidosis comes back. I've talked to several people here and interviewed some other patients, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, for 5 years there was nothing, then all of a sudden it was in my bones."
Yeah.
And
well, I haven't got there yet.
You're so lucky. I mean, you're unfortunate because you've had it, but I mean, you're lucky that it hasn't gotten in your bones or shown up.
And I mean, I thank God if the pulmonary resident hadn't been moonlighting in Augusta that weekend and suspected my wide and mediastinum meant something, was important, who knows where I'd be right now.
Right. Well, look, good luck. Get your proclamations out there. Hopefully this podcast will help.
Right.
And because the whole reason we're doing this is we're sharing our stories. We want to spread the word, and we want to give comfort to the people that are sitting at home, not knowing what they've got, or just finding out, or suffering with sarcoidosis in some way, as all of us are.
Yes.
So
no, I hope, just because I've had to really search and get lucky finding things. Keep searching, and maybe you will get lucky too, because there's more resources now.
Got it. Good.
Okay.
Bob, thank you for joining us on the Sarc
thank
Fighter
you.
podcast. Let me hit stop.